Welcome to Choreography, a podcast about the greatest sport on ice, figure skating. I'm Wendy Buskey.
And I'm Adrian Buskey. And in this episode, we will be talking about the Skate to Milano Cortina, aka the Olympic Qualifier, aka Chinese Nebelhorn. That last name to me is extremely silly, but I understand why the skating community has latched onto it in the way that it has. But anyway, this has been the big nail-biter event that we've been looking forward to.
/ dreading.
Yeah, a little bit of both, because this is the deciding event that was there to finish off the spots for the people who were going to qualify for the Olympics. It doesn't, outside of a couple of notable neutral athletes, doesn't qualify these individual skaters themselves for the event, but it does create those spots for their nations. And there were a number of skaters here that were surprising that they had to be in this position, but because they had really bad performances or flukes, falls, and issues and stuff at Worlds. And so there were some really elite competitors that were here, and there were a lot of people who were far below the general elite kind of level, a lot of middle tier and below skaters that were either just sort of racking up international points and getting a really great experience, or very much had the possibility of reaching the Olympics on the line, even if it was a long shot.
Yeah. And I think that we saw, I guess we should just start at the part that everyone is talking about, which is we finally saw some Russians.
Right. So after several years of Russia not being allowed in competition for all of those reasons you already know past the last Olympics, this is the first time that, as usually happens around the Olympics, the ISU creates some level of neutral athlete committee team that is an
acronym that you won't remember. AIN is
right,
this one.
Right, yeah. That means something in practice at the event and virtually nothing otherwise, but just means that these skaters can't skate underneath their own flags and can't be referred to as Russian skaters or Belarusian skaters. They have to be this unaffiliated team, but again, that is like in name only kinds of stuff. Everybody knows who they are and who they're skating for.
Of course.
Particularly when we look at the very obvious front runner going into this event, even though we have not seen her in ISU competition at all. This is the first time within ISU competition that we are seeing Adelia Petrosian, who has been the current Russian wunderkind. People who continue to follow Russian skating, even though they have been not part of ISU competition, have talked a lot about this skater. She, like most of the Russians, is extraordinarily well trained, has a really great classical kind of background. I think stylistically she's a little different from some of the other ones that we've seen before. Has a ton of Ultra C elements that we did not see in competition here because she was recovering from injury. In fact, as I understand it, she almost did not compete here. They almost subbed her out at the last minute. They brought a substitute just in case it didn't seem like she was going to be competition ready.
But she was, and she had what I would refer to as a solid short. Like, it looked confident, calm, no issues. I don't know what I was expecting on my first viewing, because admittedly, I have not watched any of Adelia before this.
We haven't watched any of the Russian stuff in the year since they've been out of the ISU.
I have not. So I was kind of expecting something huge and memorable, and she did a Michael Jackson themed short program that I thought was solid, but it didn't wow me, is what I would say.
It wasn't mind-blowing. I think that with all of the hype, and, worth noting that if you're in social media spaces where people talk about skating, and I know that we're opening ourselves up to this because we have a comment section where,
dangerous.
The Russian fans and expansive stands for Russian skating tend to deluge comments in support of their skaters. And I understand that. I understand that desire to see your skaters back out there and competing and being represented and supporting them and all of that is great. But it does tend to come in these massive waves that sometimes feel a little bot driven or
just a little intense.
And also tend to feel a little exaggerated, right?
Yeah.
Like if we go back a few years ago when the first time we saw Kamila Valieva, and of course her name comes with the big asterisk now, of course, the doping scandal and everything that went down at the Olympics. But the first time we saw her, she lived up to that hype, right?
Oh, completely.
She was an extraordinary presence on the ice, lyrical skater, incredible jumps. And it's really sad that the doping thing wrapped around it, because it just doesn't feel like that was something that ever needed to happen. Because even if she didn't have a bunch of Ultra C, she still would have been an elite standout skater.
Unbelievable. It's one of those moments I specifically remember watching her for the first time in senior competition and being awed by her. So yeah, exactly that. She lived up to the hype that I'd been hearing for so long. And this is not to take any offense to Adelia. I just felt like that particular program didn't wow me. Her free skate, however, I thought was much stronger and seemed really well suited to her style of skating.
Yeah, I think that the short program, the Michael Jackson one, I really like the costume, and there are certain choreographic flourishes in there that I thought were cool, but it didn't strike me as an extraordinarily well-refined program. And I think particularly when you make a comparison to the eventual second place skater here, Anastasia Gubanova's short program, which is so dynamic and so choreographically refined, and so showcases what a fantastic skater she is, even though, and their scores were very close after the short. I get that Adeli's technical is probably a little bit stronger, but I thought that Gubanova's just showcased a much more refined skater.
Completely.
I think that 68-72 for Adelia Petrosian was a pretty fair score for what she got there. She got a 140.91 after the three, which totals out to a 209.63. That's a very strong international competitive score.
Especially for a debut.
And especially for somebody who was not throwing any of those Ultra C elements that we know that she has in her arsenal, but couldn't really safely throw at this event because she was skating on injury. And we did see a few bobbles in that free program. Where
here and there.
Yeah.
Very minor.
Very minor, but I think the kinds of things that happen either because of a little bit of nerves, although seeing her in the kiss and cry, she doesn't strike me as somebody with a lot of nerves. I feel like there's a overwhelming sense of confidence that comes off of her. But more than likely that just there are parts of her jump technique that are a little shaky just because she is recovering from injury.
Yeah, I mean, if there is something I 100% agree with is she definitely, even without her Ultra Cs, came here and made a point that she is going to be in the mix like we all knew she would be, for sure. As soon as she adds back in even one quad and a triple axel, everyone has to make sure they're upping their game because her technical content is going to be extremely hard to beat. But if you look at the other half of the scoring, the more component side of things, I don't think that she is comparable to like a Kaori Sakamoto, Alyssa Liu level of stuff. So it's going to be interesting to just see how those two things balance out.
Yeah. And my end reaction was a little bit of a head scratcher because on one level, and again, this is first exposure and somebody who is not full powered. But the thing we often saw with Russian skaters when they'd go out there and skate those programs that were so extraordinarily complicated with quads and triple axles and stuff is in most cases, the actual artistic component side would suffer because they had to concentrate so heavily on having those really difficult layouts. We see that happen with the men all the time as well, too. Balancing that out and being complete is a real challenge when you're going for the big, big stuff. So I will be very interested to see what Petrosian looks like when she has those things back and whether that balance holds, if she can, look this good artistically. But in the end, I was just slightly underwhelmed. And I don't say that to be like a big negative against her. I think I'm very sensitive to hype trains. Like you are. It's something that I have to really kind of manage myself when I see somebody or something or anything. It's like a movie or a new record coming out or whatever. And people like do the incredible hype train. Almost always makes me a little cynical about it. And so I'm trying to like manage my own subjective bias when I go in here and see this. And I'm trying to be objective about it. And what I see is somebody who is very, very good, but I didn't yet see that complete bulldozer of a skater that everything, the hype going into this, I was expecting. I think it ended up being a little closer here between her and the second place, Georgia's Anastasia Gubanova. I think, of course, the elephant in the room when we get to the Olympics is scoring around the Russians, because what we have seen for decades is some pretty questionable times when people have been scored in ways it's not the fault of the skater, but where we've seen people say, win a gold medal over Yuna Kim or score higher than a Wakaba Higuchi when you skated the same basic programs and Wakaba was clean and you weren't, or whatever it is, and then still get rewarded higher. Those are the questions that we always are looking for. even as the Russian apologists will complain that somebody like Petrosian is underscored here, when I don't think that that is a valid representation of what we saw on the ice.
No, if there is something I would not say is that I think she was completely fairly scored. I think she was really strong. A 209.63 for her total is a really, really strong start.
Yeah,
and
especially without ultra Cs. Yeah.
Exactly. And she's not at full power. So I think this was great for her. And overall, I think that, like I said, this is the start of what we're about to see at the Olympics. She did her job here, and that's all she had to do.
Yeah. And I've been talking kind of back and forth on it here, but if there was a skater at this event that I was most impressed with her programs and her delivery, though, it was Anastasia Gubanova's, or Gubanova. I say it two different ways. I apologize. But from Georgia, Anastasia at Worlds had a disaster short program. It washed her out of the free skate. And it was both extraordinarily important for her and for her federation that she could come to this event and lock this down. She is a skater who is too good to have been in the position to have to try to lock this in this way. But, you know, what we saw from her is a really cool new short program. It's got a very Bollywood kind of theme. It walks that line of being culturally appropriative, and I'm not in the position to comment on how legit that issue is, but she skates it beautifully. It's so fun.
It's really good.
Yeah. And then her free skate leans a little bit more towards, you know, what we kind of expect from Anastasia, where you get a little bit more classical, a little bit more like
soft, romantic, like thematic, I think is Ghost. I'm not going to lie. It lost me a little bit because I just didn't love the music. And I'm not necessarily always the biggest fan of those types of programs.
Yeah.
However, she was extraordinary.
Yeah.
Like, this is not to knock her. It's just really the music more than anything.
The music seems to be from like the musical, like theatrical musical version of Ghost. And it is a bit melodramatic in a way that I don't particularly care for. But I did think Goops did a fine job here.
Absolutely.
And again, if we look at her short program was less than a point behind Petrosian. Her free skate was a little more than 2 points behind Petrosian. So Petrosian won with a 209.63, like you said. Goobs comes in here with a 206.23. 206.23 is terrific for Gabanova.
Yes.
And both of those scores are very, very competitive in the women's division right now and looks very, very strong. But of course, the other big question mark for the women coming in here was going to be the return of Belgians Luna Hendricks, who we have not seen in competition for about a year.
Yeah. And I'll say she looked extremely fit and happy and ready and enthusiastic. Her short program also looked tight and nervous, as you'd expect. I mean, this is her first competitive program in over a year. She's had multiple surgeries. She didn't know where she was going to fall. Like, so, I mean, not to, wow, I feel like I just foreshadowed falling.
Don't do that. Yeah.
Oopsies. But in general, yeah, she had two mistakes in her short program. I actually felt like a 66.92 was a little generous for her short.
Yeah, I think she was overscored in the short program.
And I love Luna. I was so happy to see her.
Yeah, based on the mistakes that she made there and just several places in that short program where I thought that the refinement wasn't quite there yet. It didn't look entirely together. I would have been more comfortable with that being scored somewhere in the 64 to 65 range. I think it's just a little bit too high. And after it was done, I was like, oh, I felt like they gave Luna a gimme there. And,
just a little bit.
And again, I adore her, and I'm very excited that she qualified and blocked that second spot for Belgium, particularly because it means that she and Nina Pizzarone will not be at each other's throats trying to, and because we already know that they don't necessarily like each other. Not that there's necessarily animosity. They just don't seem to be connected or friends in any way. And I'm happy that they have those two spots. And I'm particularly happy that her free skate was much, much stronger and was very, very close to Goobs.
Yes. Actually, I mean, it was only less than 0.2? Ridiculously close.
0.11 difference between those two programs. And very different programs from each other.
Very different programs. And I much preferred Luna's here. And I thought Luna looked phenomenal here. Like, this is the Luna Hendricks I've been waiting to see. I don't have a ton of notes. And it obviously needs to still be refined. It's not at its full form yet. It's the first time she's performing these programs. And I liked her short program. Don't get me wrong. The thing I liked most actually was that her short and her long don't feel identical. She has been in the past kind of guilty of having short and long programs that had different costumes, but overall had similar vibes. Not these.
Luna has been kind of insisting on taking us to the club for a couple of seasons, and in some places that worked really well. Last times we've seen her, they had really fallen apart. So yeah, seeing something that's a little bit more varied and moves away from some of that style that she was leaning too heavily on before, I think is really important. So yeah, that free skate, a big come up. Very excited for her to lock this position. I think even if she had not been generously scored in the short the way that she was, she would still have been easily in this third place spot.
But they were making sure.
Yeah. So it shook out okay. I think one of the other interesting placements here is the fourth place finish of Victoria Safanova, who is another of the unaffiliateds. In this case, I believe she is from Belarus. Again, the unaffiliateds were the question mark. What are they going to be able to do when they come in here? I think what we saw from Victoria is strikingly textbook perfect jump technique.
Very, very good jump
Her jumps
technique.
are so impressive. She's quite tall and lanky. She's somewhat, I think, physically comparable to, say, like a Kimi Rapond, but doesn't jump the same way and just has like a just impeccable style when it comes to that. She is much, much flatter when it comes to the components and the artistic expression. So she's nailing those jumps, but it's, again, like a little bit comparable to, say, like a Sarah Everhart. Somebody, I think Sarah actually has a little bit more expression, which is saying something because Sarah doesn't have a ton. But, you know, how Sarah is such a jump technician who is expanding that expression. I think Victoria, I mean, if you just want to show extraordinary jump, man, she's got it. But the programs otherwise felt a little flat and a little lifeless in places.
Yeah, but I mean, I will give her credit. She was 7th in the short and came back really strong in that free skate. She actually was 4th in the free skate, which helped, bump her up whenever others kind of faltered that had been above her. This is actually going to be her second Olympics, and good for her. Like, I felt like it was a showing of grit. That's sort of what I thought of when I was watching her. Like, she just had that like focused energy of, I'm going to do everything I can and nothing more. There was no real emotional component on the ice.
Yeah.
It was just get the job done.
Yeah. And I think that what we saw from a lot of skaters was a lot of strategy as far as like some of them skating leaner, simpler programs in the attempt to go cleaner, and others throwing everything in the kitchen sink out there in order to try to grab those top spots. And skater to skater, seeing which ones of those strategies paid off and which ones didn't. And I think, yeah, like you said here for Victoria, she stayed hyper focused, did what she did best, what I'm assuming based on what we saw there, and it got the job done.
Yes.
So she got her spot and she did very well. If there's a question mark.
Yeah, because I feel like all the top 4 were solid. All their placements made total sense. No notes.
Yeah. The 5th place and the final lock here is where I have some question marks. And we're going to see this question repeated a couple of times because this isn't the only discipline where it feels like this. But in the 5th place, Ryung Zhang locks that final qualifier spot for China. Of course, the host nation for this event, again, Chinese Nebelhorn. And Ryung Zhang she's a delightful skater, right? Like she's really fun to watch. I like her energy out there.
Really solid.
Yeah. She's a solid skater. But we look at, she had a 4th place finish in the short with a 62.78, which was, notably like 5 points ahead of Victoria Safanova. She gets a 116.98 in the free. And that number feels a little generous based on the performance that she gave there, because it was pretty uneven. And really where the kind of question mark comes in is her edging out Stefania Yakovleva from Cyprus, who was not as strong in the short program, but delivered a very solid free skate that was a couple of points higher than Ryung Zhang, and just got some calls and some stuff on it that left her a little over 2 points back from Ryung Zhang. And it didn't feel quite right. That didn't feel real.
Yes. I feel like Stefania was definitely a more complete skater at this point. Ryung Zhang was very good, but still very junior.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, having them tight didn't seem off base. However, I think if I had seen more mistakes from Stefania, I would have felt better about it. But there were just some unusual calls, and I'm rambling with just the general sentiment that you had of it didn't feel right.
It felt like they cooked the books.
A little bit.
And again, I'm going to use that phrase again later on when we get to Ice Dance. But it felt in that moment like something that when we were watching the ISU feed and you have Mark and Ted, who are, the two most positive people, sometimes I adore them, but I do sometimes miss a little bit more critical commentary that we would get from some of the more mainstream commentators. I think because Mark and Ted spend so much time in juniors, and they are very generous commentators, and I adore that about them. But there are some places where I think they are a little bit careful, and Mark will occasionally give there's a question I have here, but I can't.
Ted does too.
Yeah, and they do, but I think they tend to back off things a little bit. But something that they noted several times during this event was rapid number changes in the instant before the scores would be announced. And we would see these really long judging time periods, sometimes much longer than we're kind of used to seeing. Although I'll note Kinoshita Cup was awful about that a couple of weeks ago. But there were just times where they would think they knew what the score was, and then you'd hear one of them react. They're like, oh, something just changed. Oh, two things just changed. And when you're seeing stuff happen like that, yes, things are under review and there's a lot to go through. I'm not a judge. I can't speak to what those people are having to deal with as far as the level of complexity of what the scoring requires. But there are times when it feels like a bunch of rapid changes happen and weird little nitpicks suddenly appear that you almost never see get called. It has that feeling of somebody putting their finger on the scale. And that's what I feel like happened here with the Cyprus skater. I feel like a finger got put on the scale and it dropped her into that 6th position. I don't think it was quite as egregious as what we saw in Ice Dance, which again, foreshadowing.
Yeah.
But I didn't like it. And I don't say any of that to take away from Ryung Zhang because I did really enjoy her skating. I just thought that Yakovleva was the better skater on the day. And even with the deficit that she had of 3 points in the short, I think that she should have taken that. And I don't like it and I'm not happy about it.
No, I agree with you.
Beyond that, this is a big competition in the singles and there's so many names to go through. There was a lot of really nice skates from people who were further down the list. A lot of stuff that wasn't very strong either. I do think that Norway's Mia Risa Gomez, who landed in 7th here, was really, really nice. I enjoyed Mia's skating quite a lot. I thought that the energy she brought to the ice was just really sweet and really wonderful. And there was an Estonian skater I've not seen before, Christina. Oh my gosh, I don't have any idea how to say her name.
Lisovskaya?
Lisovskaya? That sounds good. Of course,
apologies if not.
Yeah. Christina, of course, is recognizable out there. She has this short, very dark bob. So she
stands out
amongst the rest of the skaters. And Estonia is faced by one of our faves, Nina Petrakina, who has really had a big it girl rise over the last year or so. But it's really wonderful to see another Estonian skater and somebody who's I think she's 25. So to come out here and get into the top 10 and do a really good job for our country there was pretty wonderful too.
The one other person I do want to not leave without mentioning is Josephine Talliagard. If you listened to last week's episode, she was at Lombardia and was brilliant there. This week, unfortunately, was not her week. She was 9th in both the short and the free and didn't quite have enough to make it to one of the top 5 spots to make it, or the 3 below it that were the alt spots. So we will not be seeing our darling Josephine Talliagard, but I will always, always say how wonderful she is to watch. No one emotes like her out there. There is just something special that she has that Mark and Ted were also talking about. You just want to watch her. She makes you feel like she is singing the song. She is the emotional component in the program. It's really special and I am very sad for her. But admittedly, I did not expect her to make it. It would have been kind of a miracle, but it would have been a nice miracle.
She's a brilliant performer, but not a great technical skater.
No.
And that was always going to hold her back here, particularly with a pretty rough free skate that, she was popping jumps and having issues. She was just not going to rank very high. But man, she's just such a wonderful performer. We do still get the rest of the season with her, and I hope that we'll get to see more of her. But I think that the real story for Josephine, I think, post this year is going to be her really transitioning into a coach and choreographer position, because I think she does a lot of her own choreography and it's brilliant. So I'm really looking forward to what her post-competitive career is like, because I think she's a real talent. I just adore her as a personality.
Absolutely. Well, since we've already been foreshadowing some dance questions, I think we move on to dance next, where thank goodness.
This is the real stressor for us going into this event.
Like deep exhale.
Yes, more than anything else, was just hoping for locked spots for particularly Allison Reed and Saulius Amberlivikas from Lithuania, because we were huge fans of them, and they had washed out of the free skate based on a fluke fall at Worlds. And for a team that had, Allison just got her citizenship, so they were actually able,
for really real.
Yeah, for really real, able to go to the Olympics this year, and then to wash out there, such a disaster. And going into this event, they were the obvious front runners. Their quality level is so high. They are such a strong team. So them coming out on top is exactly where you'd expect them to be.
Which they did. Let's just
they
say
did.
it there.
They did. Very solid. They had a fantastic rhythm dance. Utterly brilliant. So strong. No notes. Absolutely amazing. Came out with an 80-95. Great score. And then their free skate takes the top spot again easily with a 117.78. I do think that free is still a little weird musically. The choices, it's not the choice I would have made in the Olympic season. And like I've said before, there's a part of me that thinks that come the Olympics, it might be better to go back a couple of seasons to the Enough of Our Machine program, because that's an Olympic program and this one doesn't feel like that to me. However, it is so intricate, so complex, especially once you get into the second half. There is so much going on. You could feel them playing it a little safe.
Yes. They were great, but definitely cautious.
Yeah. We saw them at Bolero Cup a couple of weeks ago, and they had so much more abandon and so much more freedom in those skates. Here, you could tell it was the don't you dare fall, don't you dare make a mistake. We can afford to lose some component points as long as we skate these clean and do them to the utmost of our ability. They come out here with a 198.73, perfect score, easily take the top spot. But this is the heart and the throat stuff. Like, I had every confidence in them, but also ice is slippery and you never know what's going to happen on the day. So I was thrilled that they made it out here.
And also, to be fair, this is the only event we watched live.
Yes.
So we actually legitimately had the nervous energy of, okay.
I watched both of the ice dance
You
live.
did.
So I stayed up till 2:00 in the morning in both cases. You slept through a lot of it and then woke up just in time to see Reed and Amberlivikas. And then we went back and watched everything later. But yes, we did watch the free dance live. Nail biter, but also watching them was like, it was that recognition of just how good this team is and why they deserve to be in this spot. But man, I want to give huge props to the second place finishers, qualifiers, the Australian team of Holly Harris and Jason Chan, because you want to talk about a team that has improved insanely over the last couple of years. It is Harris and Chan. They were fantastic here. A year ago, I was completely mid on this team. And then they came to 4 continents and they were extraordinary. Their free dance had really come together. They were great at Worlds, but they were the only team at Worlds that qualified for the free dance and then did not qualify automatically for the Olympics. So again, a team that felt like shouldn't have had to have been here in order to lock this spot, but they did so very, very well. And the combination of programs, so good.
Very, very good. Their rhythm dance, I thought, was much stronger than the first time we saw it. The free dance is just so special. Whereas, like you said, we felt like Allison and Saulius were just being careful and making sure everything was perfect so that they could just get the check mark, like they did it and it's done and it's good. I felt like Jason and Holly were just all out.
Mm-hmm.
There was something about them doing this program where I did not feel an ounce of them holding back. And it was refreshing. And yeah, they've just improved so much. It's really wonderful to see.
In the third place, we get Sofia Val and Asif Kazimov from Spain.
2 ice dance teams from Spain.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah. So this has been the other ice dance team other than Olivia Smart and Tim Deek. And ones we have not seen as much of. They were strong. I will not call their programs particularly memorable to me. As I think about all of the performances that stand out to me in a significant way from this ice dance competition, my memory gets a little fuzzy on these two. It doesn't stick out to me. I remember them being extremely competent, well put together, scored as I would have expected with them here, but not a team that I was like wowed by. I was like, this is a decent team. You know, look at them. They are 13 points back from Harrison Chan, 28 points back from Reed and Amber Leviticus. So put that into perspective.
Well,
you know,
and I
they're
think
much further back.
I think that that's something worth saying about all of the remaining teams, like in your top 7 that we're going to talk about here. They are all within 3 points of each other.
Yeah, it's real tight from 3 to 7.
Exactly. Those 2 top teams were basically the ones everybody knew. Unless they make some massive error, they were in. It was the battle of everyone else to get those remaining 2 spots.
Yeah.
And I think that Sophia and Asaf absolutely did their job and no question were the 3rd place team here.
Yeah.
Like, especially their free dance, I thought was very strong. I agree. It didn't like blow me away, but they absolutely, of those remaining teams, seemed like the strongest.
Yeah. Where the question mark comes in, it starts with the 4th place and the final qualifier team of Shiyu Wang and Xinyu Liu from China. So
this is complicated.
This is complicated because, for one thing, we haven't seen them for a couple of years. We used to kind of refer to them as like the hot Chinese ice dance team because they are very aesthetically attractive people.
They are just gorgeous humans.
But they are also allegedly highly problematic.
In different ways that we're probably not going to get into.
It is way too much to get into it. And honestly, even when a lot of stuff was coming out about him a couple of years ago, it was difficult to parse, and a lot of like very online kinds of things that I just never saw actually confirmed, but they did just vanish from international competition for a while. So when they showed up here in the rhythm dance, I had to look it up and be like, what they're in competition again? I thought they were done, right? So I was surprised to see them return. I thought that their rhythm dance was fine. Their free dance is a Batman program, and I actually quite liked it. I thought there was a lot of really cool lifts and stuff in it. And notably, the thing with this team has always been that they make me think of groups like Niset and Markelov, where like they're full of really great lifts and tricks, but they're not like a highly refined team.
I think Niset and Markelov is significantly better than this team.
Sure, but I mean, I think it's just when you have like very flashy teams versus the ones that have some more substance or have higher skating skills ability. This team is great at creating really neat wow moments, but the connective tissue isn't always there.
That's fair.
And I think that, you know, the end score for them, they get a 168-83, you know, just a couple of points behind the Spanish team. I don't really have an argument with their scoring here, and maybe a little generous in their components in the free, but nothing too wild and crazy. But notably, they were in 6th after the rhythm dance. And it's what gets done to both the 7th place team, the Japanese team, but particularly the 5th place team, the Swedish team of Reiten and Majorov. I really think that the Swedes got totally hosed here. And when I earlier I said it felt like the books are being cooked, the Swedish team got nailed with like a weird exclamation point oddball call at the last moment that I think invalidated one of their elements and lost them a couple of points.
Like 1 point something. It lost them that qualifying spot.
Yeah, they got a weird arcane call that knocked them from qualifying to one step below into the alternate.
Because they were only behind the Chinese team by 0.23 in the end.
Yeah, and they were far better. The Swedish team, I was totally blown away by them in the rhythm dance. I wasn't really familiar with...
And they were 3rd in the rhythm dance.
They were 3rd in the rhythm dance with a 69-30. It was really good. And they get scored a 99-30 on the free dance here, and that is nonsense. And, you know, we talk about all the time with ice dance, the scoring is obscure and arcane and hard to parse. And oftentimes things get rated base or weird things that are really hard to figure out why they get scored the way they are. And every once in a while, just something odd gets nitpicked and it never feels consistent. You know, it just feels like that moment where the judges at the very last moment, somebody needed to change. You know, ice dance scoring is political and oftentimes BS. And this is one of those moments where, and I know we're not alone because I checked the social medias, Because I was like, am I wrong being mad about this? Because I'm mad about this. Like, I think the Swedes got screwed here. And no, I'm not the only one. I mean, oh no, big surprise. Skating fans are mad about something. but I'm with you in this one. I was really pissed off about this. I thought the Swedes absolutely got robbed. And I'm going to speak to the manager.
When you find the manager, would you please pass their number on? Because I'm curious.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah.
Wait a minute. Don't do that. That sounds like doxing. I did not mean it that way.
That's a joke.
It was a joke.
It's a joke.
Ha funny.
Yeah. But for real. Geez, it's so utterly close. Such a frustrating thing to happen there. And again, one of those places where the commentators are a moments away from the score being put up and then reacting, going, oh, something big just changed. And then even after it was done,
it was Ted asking Mark, how do you feel about these results? And Mark just almost stuttering with the I
think that these scores are going to be litigated in social media after this.
Yes.
And for good reason, because you know that's BS.
Yes. And I mean, not to discount the sixth place team from Hungary, Ignateva and Zemko, they came up from a seventh place short program and were third in the free dance. Not to discount them, but also I do not like their free dance.
Yeah. It gets a 103.15 here. Wow.
I just didn't enjoy it.
Yeah. I think this team can be a lot of fun, but
that's a personal bias. Like I think there's nothing against them in dance. I just really did not care for that Joker themed free dance at all. But I do really feel sad for Utano Yoshida and Masaya Morita from Japan, who were in fourth after the short. In their free, they did have a few more noticeable errors in their free dance, but they ended up with a 98.49, which dropped them all the way to seventh. That not as directly severe as the Swedes, who I feel like really did earn that spot, but dropping them to seventh also felt weird.
Well, they also got an exclamation point. And as I understand it, and this is sourced from Blue Sky, so I
take it with a grain of salt.
Right. But it seems like they got called on. There's an element that has a requirement that it cannot start any further away than 2 meters from the boards. That's a weird thing to have calls for, because you're operating on some level of arbitrary eyeballing the ice and saying, is that 2 meters? And I'm sure if you're much further than 2 meters, that can be pretty obvious. I saw some people say that this is one of those calls that gets trotted out every once in a great while and always throws an audience. Apparently, Chalk and Bates got hit with it back in 2022 at a Grand Prix event, and it invalidated one of their elements, and it left the audience unnerved because it was like, what is this? And again, this is one of those little calls that seems kind of odd. And I saw some people say, this never really gets called, that it is valid in this case. But if you look at it, that's probably 1.15 points or something. And that would have made the difference between them and being in the fourth place.
I know. So it was all so tight between these four teams. So
it's just real sus that two teams get these extremely obscure calls when they are within a point of qualifying over the home country's team.
The third and fourth place after the rhythm dance teams are the two teams that get the ding so that the Chinese team does successfully
lock. And in both cases, those calls get made seconds before the scores get handed out.
It feels weird.
It feels really weird. It feels really sus. And this is where I don't know how the ISU works. We've spent decades of this sport having extremely frustrating, obviously politically motivated, obviously corrupt scoring. It's something that drives people away from the sport all the time. It feels like there needs to be another independent board that reviews these scores afterwards, not to change the results after the fact. But it's kind of like, when we were looking back at that juniors event where the Chinese team did not get validated for their quad twist when it was very obviously a quad twist and the judges completely missed it. That's one of those things where an advisory board needs to come in afterwards and be like, you didn't do your job well. And there needs to be some sort of reckoning for that kind of thing. And when you have an event here where something like that happens, where it feels like somebody puts their finger on the scale right at the last minute, just enough to squeeze somebody through into a spot that they maybe didn't earn, there needs to be some sort of accountability for that. And this sport never feels like it has it. And this is the place where I get pretty angry with the sport. It fuels a lot of the discontent.
Yes. But we have 2 more disciplines, and I'm going to keep us moving.
Yeah.
So men's event is where we saw our other neutral athletes, and one of them, unsurprisingly, did take the title. Peter Gumenik, I think is how I pronounce it. We'll find out as time goes on. But he had a really solid short program, looked confident, strong. His style is not necessarily my fave, but I feel like I could put him, while I was watching him, he was kind of reminding me of like in the same category of like Anika Gotzi or
A Daniel Grassel.
Daniel Grassel has his own very distinct like style, but kind of in that same zone of like, okay, he's very strong, highly competent, has his own flair, but feels like he kind of falls into that category of skater of maybe not the top S tier crazy competitors, but the ones who are just one step below, waiting for those top guys to make mistakes so they can jump on podiums. So a very impressive, very solid short. The free had a few more mistakes, but still looked good.
Yeah, I think that, when you see his free skate, it's a 5 quad layout. So it's a very competitive technical program. This guy is, again, a terrific jumper, has a very classical kind of style. Me watching him, it reminds me of some of the men's skating from like 15 or 20 years ago that like from like when I was
with quads now.
Yeah, just with quads, but from the stuff that I would when I first watched skating. And I think my expectation is that sometimes people who've been watching the sport for a really long time that complain about how the sport has changed might watch a guy like him and be like, oh, that's real skating, or that's what I want. That's what I want the return of. And for somebody like me, who is a more contemporary oriented skating fan and doesn't have that extraordinarily long history of fandom, that return to form isn't particularly interesting to me. Like, there's a certain aspect of like his artistry that feels a little like high school theater to me. And that sounds derogatory, and I don't mean it to be. It's more that there's a stylistic component to me that feels a little loose and not particularly to my full interest. But I do think that this guy has really exciting technical. There's a real flair. There's a real confidence.
Great technique.
Yes. And definitely you could see some holes in it when it got to the free skate. I mean, we look at his scores here, that short program gets a 93.80.
That's a real good score.
That's a real good score. That's very, very competitive. You see the free skate, he gets a 169.02. Solid.
Very.
A very solid number, but not like astronomical. And for a total of 262.82, that would easily win a lot of smaller competitions, but is not the kind of score that would do like really well on, say, like the Grand Prix.
It'll do okay depending on the event and who's there.
Yeah,
but like, I'm thinking if you put him against your top like 4 to 6 men, he's going to need some more errors or just him making fewer.
Yeah.
But it keeps him in the mix. He is in the conversation for sure going into Milan and will be a threat for sure.
Yeah. And I feel like if there's something that we see kind of universally with the Russians is training to make them look and feel as absolutely confident as possible, whether it's on the ice or in the kiss and cry. I feel like they are conditioned to always put the face on like they expected to be in the spot that they're in.
Yes.
I felt that from Petrosian in a big way, that it felt like her face kind of said, yeah, that's a foregone conclusion. Give me my gold medal. And to a certain degree, from Petr, I felt that same kind of thing, but not quite to the same extent. I feel like he looked a little surprised that he had the mistakes that he did. But of course, he is not the only story here.
No.
And I think a notable one is the rise up into the second place position from Hongyoung Kim from South Korea. Of course, we've seen Kim plenty of times. He is not an unknown to us all, but he is certainly far back from Junwon Cha, who, of course, is your primary guy in South Korea. What we got here, pretty solid short program.
A little messy, but not terrible.
With a 74.69, good, not great. He gets a 153.91 in the free, which rises him up into second place. Now, notably, second place at 228.60. He is,
well back,
35 points back or so from the leader. So there's a pretty large fall off as you get deeper into the men here. But I thought Hyungam, he did a nice job. I thought that free skate felt a little clunky and mechanical in places. You could tell that this was somebody who was like holding on to his focus and his intensity to try to land everything as cleanly as possible. I think that he is capable of better artistry than what we saw there, but he had a job to do and he did that job. And the emotional reaction that he had in the kiss and cry, and along with his coach, It showed what it all meant, how hard he'd worked for it. And it was a really, really sweet moment. And I was happy to see that for him. Not the most exciting skates we've ever seen, but good enough to do what he needed to do.
He did his job.
Yeah. Speaking of,
actually, what was probably my favorite performance of the men's event entirely was the short program from Donovan Carrillo, where he just looked maybe the best I've ever seen him. It might have been the actual skate of his life. It was so fun and personality driven, but he got the jumps done as well. Got an 84.97, which is a phenomenal short program score for him. And it turned out that he really needed that excellent short program because his free skate was a mess.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. The free skate was crap. It was not good.
That's a bit harsh, but sure.
But I mean, he got real lucky.
He got really, really lucky because of, say, the person who was in third was Francois Pitot in the short program. And he wasn't that far behind Donovan, only like 3 points.
Yeah.
But Francois Pitot also had a not so good free skate with a 133.33 and was 11th.
Yeah.
So,
well, he was 7th overall, but 11th after the free. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so,
but plummeted out of that qualifying spot. Yeah. Donovan's, we always say that like you can't win a competition with your short program, but you can lose it. In this particular case,
Donovan won.
Well, yeah, he won his spot with that short. And I'm being a little less generous about that free program. It was just very messy.
He fought like hell.
He
I will
did.
give him that.
And he has all that swagger. The Elvis program is fun on him. I think it really can come together and be solid. I am thrilled that he locked this position because
happy.
I adore Donovan and I wanted to see him at the Olympics again. And now we should be able to do that. So I'm absolutely so happy about it. But man, you want to talk about getting real lucky and knowing in that last moment that the day before saved your butt because the free did not win that for him.
No, the gods were on his side.
Yeah. We saw a couple of really nice programs from the Ukrainian skater Kirlo Marsik. He locks the 4th qualifying spot. He was in 6th after the short, 4th after the free. He had a really nice free skate.
His free skate was lovely.
Really put it together very nicely. Again, a really wonderful kiss and cry reaction after the fact. This guy seems like a really delightful skater. We have seen him before. He has been enjoyable. But, when you talk about somebody who showed up here as not a favorite necessarily to lock the spot, but definitely somebody with a little bit more international experience than from some of the other guys, there was a lot riding on this for him, particularly when you consider the circumstances for his training and country situation. Also, not for nothing, there's a couple of weird little controversies in the men's competition here. And one of them is that after the short program, somebody went into the men's locker room area and took all of Marsik's like stuffy toys, all the gifts.
Basically all the things that had been thrown on the ice for him were in a bag in that room that's supposed to be locked and kept, the skaters only. But obviously somebody else got in and took all of it.
And kind of ripped up his name that was attached to it as well.
Yeah.
So yeah. And he shared about this on Twitter. Thankfully, like his skates, his suits, stuff, nothing had been tampered with, but it was like he was the only person whose stuff had just been taken like that. And he specifically said, I don't believe this is any of my unaffiliated.
No, he wasn't pointing
skaters.
fingers at his competitors at all.
And we don't know anything more about it or whatever, but it does feel really weird that something like that would take place. And it could feel very demoralizing for a skater in his position going into the free. So the fact that he did lock that spot after the free is kind of even kind of nicer.
Yeah.
Because of him facing something like that and still, coming out with a qualifying spot.
The last qualifying spot went to Hussein Lee from Chinese Taipei, which is thrilling because he is an underdog from last season that Adrian and I both just fell in love with and thought was just a pure delight on the ice.
Yeah, we saw him at Junior World last year.
And for continents.
Yeah, and every time that we've seen Yuxiang, he has such a bright, delightful personality. He doesn't have the powerful technical that a lot of the other senior male skaters have, or even some of the junior skaters have. But what he does have is a real command of his form, of his jumps, and of his artistry. And he brings this just huge personality to the ice. he kept his free program from last year, the Eleanor Rigby program, which, we had commented at the end of the season. He was one of the guys that we noted as like sort of a rising star. So when I saw that he was going to be at this event, I was super hyped about it. I think in particular, you look at his free program here, that Eleanor Rigby program, he was third in the free with a 146.67. You can note that it was not highly technical. He had no quads. I think he only had one triple axel. But what he did have was a flawless delivery.
Oh, he was clean.
Absolutely clean. Never a question. I feel like it was one of those skaters who he made the judging really easy because he didn't leave any question marks out there. Everything that he did looked strong. He sold to the judges fantastically. He sold to the audience in a beautiful way. I just never doubted him for a moment. And it was just, especially as he got into the latter half of his jumps. And I think that Mark or Ted said this, where they were like, there was a moment where you could just feel like he didn't have to think about the jumps anymore. It's like he already knew they were going to be perfect. So he was just focused on delivering everything he could from an emotional standpoint because he just knew he was on. And it was terrific. I loved it. Yes, it is not the big point getter because he doesn't have the quads and stuff, but from a sheer enjoyment of a great skate, it's hard to be better than a beautiful skating performance like that.
Before we move on to pairs, I do want to say that David Luitenbreen from Monaco had two gorgeous skates and was so close, and he is the first alternate. So if anyone falls out of the Olympics, he gets to go, but regardless, he came and without a lot of heavy technical did a fantastic job. As we mentioned earlier, Francois Pitot looked really good in the short and just couldn't do it in the free skate, unfortunately. France still has two spots. Those are expected to go to Adam Schauhemfa and Kevin Amos, but nothing is guaranteed just yet. The one other thing is the other little note of controversy that I'm going to tag you in because you know more about this than I do.
So in the 8th place was the Czech skater Georgi Ryshchenko. He had a pretty solid performance here in the short program. In the free, he threw a heavily technical program, but with a lot of problems. He had fall, he had lots of turnouts.
Technically 2 falls, I think.
It was technically 2 falls. And it was one of those risk rewards. He threw a very hard program and he did not deliver on it very well. And unfortunately, that dropped him back and eventually into 8th place. But he made some comments in the interviews afterwards that I think are pretty unfortunate. He specifically calls out Chinese Taipei's Yusong Li, who did qualify, basically saying, like, more or less kind of pointing at it and being like, well, if that's what they want, I don't know why, because, in more or less saying, like, I should have been in that spot, even though he's like 3 spaces back.
Right. He's not just behind him. There's 2 other men ahead of him.
Yeah. And it really felt like he was saying, I deserve to be in that spot, despite having a pretty unfortunate free skate. And to point at the last person who did qualify with a flawless performance that just wasn't as heavily technical, and to be really bitter about it. It's a real shame because he does mention another skater by name, saying, I don't love the scoring, or I felt like I should have done better, or whatever. I wouldn't be mad about that. But calling out another skater by name who...
It's not his fault.
It's not his fault that you landed where you did. And he had a delightful performance and you didn't. On the day, he skated better than you. But yeah, he just didn't have as high a technical. But it's just really unfortunate. And you hate to see that kind of thing. It feels very bitter. And I get emotions run high, stuff is tough, but I have a feeling like the Federation will be talking to him afterwards about being like, you need to be a proper sportsman because this is not good sportsmanship.
It's not. Well, let's wrap this up with the pairs event, which I'm admittedly a little surprised, but very happily so, that we saw a first-year senior team of Zhang and Huang from China take confidently.
Those were great programs.
They were really, really good.
I like this team a lot. I really enjoyed what they brought to the ice. I thought that, overall, like the pairs event isn't wildly exciting compared to some of the others, but I did enjoy this team a lot. This is not the Chinese question mark over the scoring here. I think that's a pretty definitive win on their part, and I liked what I saw from them, and I look forward to seeing more. This was we all expected to see Sui and Han.
Yes.
Here. I mean, that was kind of the talk over the summer of like Sui and Han were supposed to come back and they still
technically are on Grand Prix.
Yeah. They're
technically
like still listed,
see.
I guess, but are not the team that were sent here and didn't need to be
No.
because this team acquitted themselves very, very well. Solid performance. I think the other surprise is the 2nd place finish of the Armenian team of Akapova and Rachmanin.
Yeah, this team was strong.
Yeah,
they looked really ready. that was the thought I had running through my head in both of their programs is they trained for this.
Yes.
This is their Olympics.
Uh-huh.
Like they looked like most teams look in March for Worlds.
Yes.
So they were prepared. They looked extremely fit, confident, and focused. And it worked out in their favor because third place in the short, second place in the free, second overall, and not that far behind the Chinese team.
No, I mean, they did a really, really nice job here. I liked their energy a lot. I liked them in the kiss and cry. But yeah, like you said, the teams who are trained for now rather than trained for later, and who knows how that will affect them over the course of the rest of the season, but they were ready, they were solid, and they delivered.
My most delightful moment probably came from seeing Yuna Nagaoka and Sumitaro Moriguchi lock the third place qualifying for the Olympics so that Japan gets a second team going to Milan. And they had a rocky short program. It wasn't bad, but it was definitely not their best. And you could feel especially Yuna's nerves.
Yeah,
like,
she had a hard fall.
Yeah.
And we just saw them at Kinoshita Cup be dynamic and incredible
Phenomenal.
In a way we had not seen before.
Yeah.
They've made some coaching changes over the summer, and you can see it paying off. The development in this team is striking. It was a little rough after that short. They came back really solidly in the free. They were in fourth place going into it, so they didn't know if they were going to block it, but they got the job done. There's a really cute video of them backstage when they realize that they have clinched that spot for Japan and I would imagine for themselves going into the Olympics. There's also a super sweet video of them with Kathy Reed, one of their coaches, after the press conference. That it's delightful, and I just loved it. An unfortunate, and there's only 3 spots to lock here. So the first alternate becomes the French team, Camille Kovalev and Pavel Kovalev. Camille and Pavel are a veteran team that we've talked about before. They do feel like they're kind of diminishing as they hit towards the end of their career, but I still like them quite a lot.
Yeah.
And even though the free skate doesn't work as well for them here, they do drop back, and because they were in second. They had performed really well in the short, and I like their short a lot.
Yes.
They put out 2 very fun, very confident performances, just with a few mistakes in that free that knocked them out of that spot. But, first alternate is still a solid position to be in because, not for nothing. There's a lot of rumors that the Uzbekistan team that clinched a spot at Worlds might have broken up or at the very least are pulling out of all of their competitions. And if that's the case, there's no other team in that country to take their spot.
Exactly.
So that 4th spot might still turn out to be an Olympic spot. And almost definitely we'll see the Kovalevs at the Olympics anyway as part of France's team in the team competition.
Exactly. So I would be very surprised if this is the last time we see them on an Olympic type stage. So it's unfortunate, but at the same time, I think it'll be okay. The one more team I don't want to not talk about is the US's Audrey Shin and Balazs Nagy. They had a very odd error in their short program on a death spiral where Balazs essentially lost his pivot, so they lost the whole...
Invalidated the entire element.
Which, it was heartbreaking.
You almost never see that happen.
No.
And in general, Balazs just looked rough.
He looked nervous.
Yeah, he looked nervous, and there were several uncharacteristic mistakes. I mean, he is such a veteran competitor. Audrey is the new person to pairs, and here I thought Audrey was looking so much stronger. They've been the question mark going into this. They had done so well at Champs Camp. They were not very good at the John Nix competition, and they were still selected to be sent here. And I think that's a good choice from the standpoint of them getting more international competition and kind of working on those nerves. You could see they were really crushed after their short program score. However, they moved up after the free, and the free skate was a lot better, a lot
Much
more
better.
competent. And even though I do think there's a hard fall from Audrey in that free, we're starting to see them level up to the team we know they can be, because there's so much promise in this team.
Tons.
I love seeing Audrey Shin as a pairs girly. I think it suits her really well, but I think that there's a lot of pressure on them for a first season team,
Yeah. I guess technically second.
They appeared last season, yeah, but I mean, they're still kind of within their first year together or so. But going into the Olympics, there's a huge amount of pressure. And even though they did not lock an additional spot for the U.S. here, who the U.S. is going to send to the Olympics is very in the air.
It could still be them. There is no way to know at this point. So we'll just have to wait and see. But a 6th place overall finish is not bad. They are technically like a third alternate. So you know what? Good for them. I am just happy they got the experience, frankly.
Yeah. And a shout out to the Ukrainian and Czech teams in the 5th and 7th spot, because I think they both did a really nice job, particularly Valesi and Badar in that 7th place. I like that Czech team a lot. I wasn't super familiar with them. We saw them, I think, last week at Lombardia, and they didn't look as good there as they did here. So I think that is a team that is improving, and I look forward to seeing more from. But overall, I thought the pairs event was the least problematic and very enjoyable, even if it seemed like it had kind of the lowest stakes of those competitions.
Well, all that's left is who's gold in your heart?
I am really on the fence on this. I've been struggling with this as we've been talking about this at the end of it, and I don't really know where to land. And if I just think about the different performances that I was most into, I will go with Holly Harris and Jason Chan.
Knew it. That's exactly what I thought you were going to say.
I was going to do?
Yes.
I will go with Harrison Chan from Australia because I thought both of their programs were the best things I've ever seen them do. I was absolutely delighted with that free skate. I thought they really killed it on that. So very excited for this season from this team and so hyped that they have locked their spot.
I'm giving mine to Donovan Carrillo because that short program was money and he did it when he needed to do it. So I'm so happy to have seen that and that he somehow squeaked this out and that we'll get Donovan again at Milan.
I feel like that short program wrote the check and the free skate cashed it. And thankfully the balance was still good afterwards. Ooh. So squeaked it out. So yeah. Okay. Well, what do we have after this? What's next?
Oh gosh, I believe, and I apologize, my brain is a little fried. So I think it's Nebelhorn, the real one.
The real Nebelhorn?
Next week.
Actual Nebelhorn. Hashtag actual Nebelhorn. Hashtag real Nebelhorn.
I think it is. And I think we get to see Isabeau and Amber
Ooh,
next week.
Ooh, that'd be exciting. Yeah.
Yes, I'm pretty sure.
Honestly, like my brain has been up to this point of the season. This is all I focused on. So everything past this now, I need to like reset, reboot.
That's where I'm at. Yeah.
Because all of my tension was saved for this.
Yeah. But now we know. Yeah. We know what's happening. Mm-hmm. And now we can just proceed.
Yeah. We can acknowledge and move on.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, stick around with us for that. Let us know your reactions to things in the comments. Let us know if you thought the books got cooked in a few places, how you felt that everybody delivered here, who was gold in your heart, who were the standout performances. And for Choreography, I'm Adrian Buskey.
And I'm Wendy Buskey.
And we will talk to you next time.
Bye-bye.